Ads and Sales, a study of advertising and selling from the standpoint of the new principles of scientific management, by Herbert Newton Casson. Chapter 4. Face-to-Face Salesmanship. Most salesmen of the better grade are of three types or classes. 1. The actor. 2. The hustler. 3. The Sunny Jim. The actor salesman is the one who has learned his story by heart, who treats all his customers in the same way, and, like an actor, makes his entrance, his act, and his exit always in the same manner. If he is a good actor, he may succeed very well, but if he is a bad actor, he does no more than pick up the inevitable business. He has transferred his profession into a habit. The hustler is the salesman who has been developed by his instinct for traveling into a sort of human steam engine. He dashes in, dashes around, and dashes out. He wins the admiration of many customers as being a live wire. On routes where he is known, he is liable to make good, but with a new article or on a new route, he is not usually a winner. He has, of course, a wrong ideal of efficiency. He does not see that mere activity is not necessarily progress, just as the wooden-legged sailor found when he took on a load of whiskey, got his wooden legs stuck in the sidewalk, and walked around himself all night. So a hustler may often find that mere energy may leave him tied at the post. The Sunny Jim salesman is the popular species, the kind that gets dramatized. He is to most people the ideal and final type. Almost all the books on salesmanship, and all the lectures, and all the lessons tend to produce the Sunny Jim salesman. Even to criticize him will seem revolutionary to most of the present-day authorities on salesmanship. The man with a glad hand and the smile that won't come off, he is the one who is constantly held up to us as the model of all the selling virtues. Now it goes without saying that a man with a smile will succeed better than a man with a grouch. Sunny Jim is more efficient than Jim Dumps. But salesmanship is a much higher art than the art of smiling. Good humor and friendliness are not the main peaks of salesmanship. They are no more than the foothills. To reach the pinnacles of salesmanship, a man must have great qualities of mind as well as great qualities of disposition. He must have a brain that can play chess with the public. He must be alert, receptive, masterful. He must have his profession mapped out in large lines. And he must take his job seriously, as one that requires the severest mental concentration. When you stop to think of it, it is a great art to handle a man in such a way as to win both his trade and his friendship. A living man is the most complex mechanism in the world. Compared to him, a locomotive is a play toy. The slightest blunder may cause him to work badly or to break down, yet there are no printed directions attached to him. All we can do is to watch his eyes and do our best. In the first place, an efficient salesman never tackles his man. He unlearns the football tactics that he learned at college. All the things that were right in football are wrong in salesmanship. Goals in the commercial world are not won by kicks. If you crash unexpectedly into another man's mind, his mind will naturally resent your arrival, and first impressions are very lasting. The first few words of self-introduction are very important. I well remember how often I failed as a cub reporter because of my clumsy entrances. The first target I selected for an interview was Dr. Eliot, at that time president of Harvard. "Dr. Eliot," I began blandly, "I will not take up more than half an hour of your time. I merely wish, etc., etc." Needless to say that in 3 minutes I was out on the sidewalk, politely refused, and dismissed. Whoever in these tense days comes with the threat to rob us of a whole half hour, 30 large minutes, 1,800 serviceable seconds, may expect to be dismissed. Introductory words should be as few as possible. The really big men in the business world require none at all. They value their time by heartbeats. They are men of few words, and they appreciate a statement that is short and straight to the point. The pith, that is what a competent businessman wants. The most efficient method of approach is to come to a man from his own point of view. If you can do this, you will be welcome no matter what you have to sell. You must never talk at a man, always talk with him. The difference between these two propositions is the difference between failure and success. If you make a brilliant approach from your standpoint, you may fail. and if you make a clumsy approach from his standpoint, you will probably succeed. After 13 years of very varied experience as an interviewer and business getter, I have no hesitation in saying that the only sure way to succeed in approaching any eminent or busy man is to come to him from his side of the fence, not from yours. For example, I have invariably made it a point, whenever I had to secure a statement or an article from a president of a university or a distinguished author, to read his latest book and to base my request upon one of its ideas. This method I have never known to fail. Any author, even if he is drowning, and he has gone down for the 3rd time, will come up again for a few final seconds of life if anyone will ask him a question about his latest book. The same plan applies to an inventor who must be asked about his latest invention. A reference to his earlier inventions may only worry him. It is always the latest, the one that is just fighting its way, that stirs the mother heart of an inventor. In the case of a railway president, your question should be based upon the best item in his last annual report. On that item, he has a reservoir of talk and an abundant supply of courtesy. And in the case of a banker, the key to his goodwill is some favorable fact concerning a property upon which he has just loaned a large sum of money. This plan holds good both with the smallest and the greatest men. I have met a few people who were so great that they were not concerned mainly about their own glory. Alfred Russel Wallace, for instance, John Fritz, Cardinal Gibbons, Park Godwin, John Bigelow, Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But such men are exceptions to all general rules. The almost invariable fact is that there is an altar to vanity at every great man's desk, and whoever would hope for any favor must first offer up a small sacrifice upon this altar. In the preparation of magazine articles, I have found it necessary to secure favors in interviews from 3 of the occupants of the White House. To one, I brought a new book by a French author who had a favorable reference to one of the unpopular acts of this president. The president was highly pleased. "At last," he said, "here is one man who has found out a little of the truth." He at once gave me $7 to buy a copy of the book, and granted my request for a very difficult interview. A second president I secured by asking him if he had noticed that all his speeches and messages had one central theme, one motif, one dominating purpose. He had not noticed this, of course, and was pleased as a child when I told him the magic words, domestic expansion. And a third president was delighted to oblige me when I pointed out to him how much greater his responsibilities were than the responsibilities of Lincoln and Washington. So much rant and cant has been written about unselfishness and modesty that I have no hesitation in speaking frankly. The truth is that no man has ever or can ever accomplish any great work without being self-centered. His creed must be faith in himself, and it is a cheap and silly sneer to say that he is an egotist. Certainly he is an egotist. He is more than that. If he is anywhere in the front row, or if he is momentarily in the public eye, he believes himself to be the central figure and the main history maker of his day. If you have ever noticed the fleet of tiny tugs pushing the giant Lusitania into her dock, you will know how a great personage ought to be handled. The tugs do not meet the Lusitania head-on. They do not collide. If they did, they would be crushed like eggshells. No, they trot up deferentially, moving in the same direction as the big ship. They push against her bow, gently at first, and then harder and harder, until they are using every pound of force they possess. But there is never a jolt or jar, and the little tugs are plainly helping the big ship do what she wants to do. There you have an illustration of salesmanship at its best. Self-interest and self-respect. These are the 2 handles that you will find on all men. Some men have one handle only, and others have both. But if you want to move any man, either genius or criminal, you must seize him by either one of these handles. Many a sale has been lost because the salesman instituted a comparison between the man he was talking to and some less important man. This is always fatal. In one case, in which I was called in as an expert, a certain $50,000 property had been offered to 100 or more probable buyers, and all had refused it. The reason was plain. All the testimonials to the value of the property were written by small unknown men, and such opinions thrust upon larger men were felt to be an impertinence. To every man, the one most important and interesting word in the language is his own name. However commonplace it may be, he has that one distinguishing mark at least. Better not go near a man than to meet him and mispronounce his name, and to meet him and not know his name. That is as fatal to the success of your interview as though you carried a wet towel and slapped him in the face with it. Few small incidents are more gratifying to a man than when some apparent stranger appears and tells him a new fact about his own name. For instance, suppose a telephone salesman wants to sell service to a man who is named O'Gray. He approaches his man and says, "Good morning, Mr. O'Gray. Do you know that we have 11 men named O'Gray in our telephone book, and we want yours to make the even dozen?" This interests and pleases O'Gray. Here is a fact about his name that he did not know, and which he will be sure to tell his wife and his relatives. Of course he buys the telephone service and becomes the 12th O'Gray. Not to do this would spoil a good story. If you cannot discover any distinguishing mark about the man himself, talk about his location. Talk about his building. If it is well kept, tell him so. If the city is coming in his direction, tell him so. Say something that will please him, and that will make him respect your judgment. No one likes to do business with a stranger, and if you show that you know nothing and care nothing for the other man, certainly he will care nothing for you and your goods. Talk him. That's the main thing. Before you venture to worry a man about your merchandise, you owe him the honor of having first thought about him and what he is doing. To do this is not flattery, as some salesmen foolishly believe. It is rather good breeding. It is courtesy. It is showing a proper deference and respect for the personality of your customer. In many cases, it is better to listen first and talk afterwards. If you have reason to believe that your man has any grievances or any story of success or failure, draw it from him. It is always better for him to talk to you than for you to talk to him. This I have learned to be a fact in hundreds of cases. Many a salesman talks his own chances to death. No matter how interesting you are, you cannot possibly be as interesting to a man as his own voice is. This is an axiom of human nature which the great majority of salesmen forget. Especially if he has a grievance, you must listen. You must sympathize. You must see his point of view. If he has been wronged by your firm, you must make restitution. You must not insult him by explanations and defenses. Even if he is only half right, which is usually the case, it is better to admit his contention and give him what he honestly believes is his due. As Herbert Spencer remarked in one of his last articles, the brain is mostly feeling. The faculty of reason is very small in the best of us. Reason is nature's youngest and most delicate child. It was last to come, and it may be first to go. But feeling, on the contrary, is as old as the human race, and older. There will always be feeling as long as there is life. And one of the first steps to take in a sales interview is to create a favorable feeling towards your company and your goods. I may go even further than this and say don't argue or contradict. There is an old fallacy floating around to the effect that a salesman's mouth must always be full of arguments. It must not. There is not any keen demand for controversy in the business world. Politics, not business, is the natural sphere of debate. If your customer insists on debating, let him win. It is better to lose the argument and win the order than to win the argument and lose the order. One of the great discoveries that made Marshall Field the ablest storekeeper in the United States was this: the customer is always right. Wherever possible, the salesman should carry something to show. It is always easier to win a man through his eyes than his ears. The best possible argument is to show the article itself. The second best is to show a sample or model. Words are only third best. Also, it is often handy to have a writing pad and a large blue crayon. Diagrams are very convincing, and if you can make a diagram of your customer's own situation with him in the midst of his larger competitors, he will be fascinated. Even when you talk, you should talk in pictures as far as you can. Use homely illustrations. Give examples. Abstract talk scatters and hits nothing. Always speak of some one person or some one thing. You will not, in the course of the year, talk to more than 3 or 4 philosophers. For instance, when C.W. Hunt, the famous engineer, set out to sell his coal carrier, he had just one argument, and it invariably made a sale. His carrier transported the coal in little pockets, instead of dragging the coal along a trough, which was the usual way. So Mr. Hunt would say to a coal man, "You see, it's just like this. If you want to move a cat across a street, would you drag it across by the tail while it clawed and scratched you and the roadway? Or would you put it in a basket and gently carry it across?" This was not an argument. It was not logical. Coal and cats are 2 different propositions. But it was a picture, and it at once appealed to the customer's mind. From first to last, it is the duty of the salesman to cater to his customer's mood, to his beliefs, and his feelings. No matter how wrong-headed and whimsical he may be, the time to correct him is after you have made the sale, not before. Always, you must keep in mind that the customer is the oak tree and the salesman is the ivy. Unfortunately, we cannot recreate customers. We cannot melt them down and pour them into a new mold. We must take them as they are, bundles of fallacies and contradictions. That is the supreme honor of salesmanship, that it deals with the most difficult of all raw material. How to be adaptable without being servile. How to have the strong hand in the soft, pliable glove. That is the problem of the salesman. He must be quick to harmonize with his customer. He must learn to harmonize with him as successfully as gray harmonizes with blue or as golden does with purple. He must be a man of finesse without deception and diplomacy without insincerity. Most people have become too wise or too refined to be captured by the old-time methods of brag and bluff. They cannot be driven into buying by a sandstorm of wild statements. Neither can they be cajoled by drinks, auto rides, and theater parties. The day for these fooleries has gone by. The demand has come for salesmen of a higher class. The fact is that human nature has moved up, and the salesman must move up with it. Human nature, that is the main factor in the whole problem. The salesman of tomorrow will study human nature as Darwin studied earthworms, as William T. Burns studies criminals, as Dr. Osier studies diseases, as Belasco studies every detail of dramatic effect. He will study human faces until he can read the headlines of character that are written there. He will keep in touch with children for the reason that many a grown man has the brain of a child. He must make people his entertainment. He must delight in people in their myriad viewpoints. In this way, he will keep fresh. He will avoid the lingo, the canned salesmanship that is so universal. The more he mixes with other people, the more simple and direct he will be, and the more successful. He will be able to sell goods more quickly because he will not be wasting his words. He will know just what to say and how to say it. The salesman of tomorrow will know that business is not a fight but a cooperation. He will know that the military spirit which permeated business in its pioneering days has no place in mature commercialism. He will know that fighting is child's play, but cooperation is a work for grown men. He will know that he and his customer are natural friends, just as North and South are, or labor and capital, or the public and corporations. Natural friends, like the eye and the foot, or the finger and the brain. That is the real relation between the seller and the buyer. Natural friends. That is the motif of the new salesmanship. End of chapter 4.